Isaac Asimov's Second Foundation plunges us back into the sprawling, post-imperial galaxy, where the meticulously crafted Selden plan for a new galactic empire faces its greatest challenge: the unpredictable, mind-bending power of the Mule. This novel, divided into two distinct but interconnected parts, delves into the desperate search for the enigmatic Second Foundation, a hidden group of mental scientists believed to be the ultimate safeguard of Hari Seldon's grand design. Part 1. Search by the Mule. The narrative opens 5 years after the Mule's swift and devastating conquest of the technologically advanced First Foundation. The First Galactic Empire, once a centralized, orderly power spanning tens of thousands of years, had crumbled into chaos. Hari Seldon, the last great scientist of this fallen empire, had developed psychohistory, a science capable of predicting the behavior of vast human populations through mathematical equations. He foresaw a 30,000-year period of anarchy and misery following the empire's collapse and, to mitigate this, established two foundations. The first foundation, public and scientific, was meant to be the nucleus of a new empire in 1,000 years. The second foundation, shrouded in absolute secrecy, was Seldon's ultimate failsafe. The Mule, a powerful mutant who could manipulate emotions and minds, had disrupted Seldon's meticulously laid plans by conquering the First Foundation. Now, the Mule seeks to complete his galactic dominion by finding and destroying the elusive Second Foundation, while the remnants of the First Foundation also desperately search for it, albeit for a different purpose: salvation. Our initial entry into this troubled galaxy introduces us to Han Pritchard, a lieutenant general in the Mule's Union of Worlds. Pritchard, once a rebellious Foundation captain, was converted by the Mule, his will and loyalty irrevocably altered to serve his conqueror. Despite his enforced devotion, a subtle, almost undetectable undercurrent of his former self lingers within him. He returns from his fifth arduous expedition, a comprehensive search for the Second Foundation, with a disheartening report: it simply does not exist. The Mule, a physically frail and grotesque figure whose mental powers compensate for his appearance, is deeply frustrated. He clings to the dying words of Ebeline Miz, a Foundation psychologist whom he had mentally stimulated, who claimed to have discovered the Second Foundation's location just before his death. The Mule suspects Miz's insights, despite his physical death, and believes the Second Foundation is indeed real, and a threat. In a surprising turn, the Mule reveals a new tactic and introduces Bale Channies, a young, ambitious, and, crucially, unconverted man from Calgon, the Mule's new capital. Channies is an individual of sharp intellect and self-interest, untainted by the Mule's mental manipulation. The Mule intends for Channies to join Pritchard in the renewed search, believing Channis's unmanipulated mind will be able to detect the Second Foundation where Pritchard's controlled one cannot. The Mule subtly hints at a disturbing truth: some of his converted men have been subtly interfered with by an unknown force, losing their initiative and ingenuity while retaining their loyalty. This suggests a mental adversary with powers similar, yet perhaps distinct, from his own. He even demonstrates a terrifying flash of his power, momentarily inflicting overwhelming grief upon Channies, a stark reminder of the unique punishments he can mete out. This chilling encounter establishes the immense stakes of the search. The journey begins with Pritchard and Channies aboard a starship, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. Channies, surprisingly, takes the lead, demonstrating a keen deductive mind. He dismisses Pritchard's exhaustive, random search methods, suggesting instead an analytical approach based on what they know about the Second Foundation. He posits that it must be a world strong in mental science but weak in physical technology, operating among the remnants of the old empire. Using the ship's advanced lens computer, which can simulate the night sky from any point in the galaxy, Channies identifies Tazenda. He notes a curious correlation between Star's End, a name given to the Second Foundation's supposed location by Hari Seldon, and the appearance of a dark nebula from Trantor, the old imperial capital. The nebula, when magnified and rotated, reveals a mouth shape that leads to a single, isolated star, which Channies identifies as Star's End. He confidently declares this to be Tazenda, situated approximately a third of the way towards the galactic center, rather than at the diametrically opposite end from Terminus as Seldon's vague prophecy had suggested. In a bold and unauthorized move, Channies orders the ship to depart for Tazenda immediately, overriding Pritchard's objections. He justifies this by arguing that if the Second Foundation has agents on Calgon, his life, and their mission's success, would be jeopardized if he carried this vital information while within their reach. Pritchard, though initially angered, finds his own initiative strangely dampened by the Mule's conversion, a subtle effect that leaves him feeling a thickening despondency. This hints at the insidious nature of the Mule's mental manipulation, stripping individuals of their intrinsic drive. Later, Chanese discovers a hyper-relay, a tracking device, on the ship's communication circuit. He shrewdly deduces that it was placed there by the Second Foundation, not the Mule, to lead them to their location. He tells the chief engineer to replace it, ensuring their pursuers believe their ruse is still active. Their journey leads them to Rossum, a bleak, snow-covered agricultural world, a subject planet of the Tzendian oligarchy. They land at a peasant's farm, immersing themselves in the primitive local culture. The peasant, Narovi, initially eager to please, informs them that the local elders are expecting them, on orders from the Tzendian governor. This unexpected welcome raises Pritcher's suspicions, but Chanese sees it as further confirmation of Tzenda's nature. He believes the Second Foundation's psychologists are concentrated in the Tzendian capital, and this meeting with the elders is a necessary step to reach them. The elders, despite their rustic appearance, exhibit a peculiar dignity and an almost unsettling unity of thought and gesture, their archaic dialect and unspoken communication hinting at a deeper, shared understanding. Their palpable fear of Tzenda, coupled with a lack of obvious physical enforcement, suggests a psychological form of control. Chanese theorizes that Tzenda's rule is based on manipulating mental attitudes, rather than overt military power. The anticipated meeting with the Tzendian governor is another revealing moment. The governor, a physically unremarkable and mild-mannered man, does not appear to possess overwhelming mental power. This leads Chanese to believe the Second Foundationers are not necessarily those in ostensible power, but rather a hidden minority controlling from behind the scenes. Pritcher, meanwhile, is consumed by a growing, horrifying fear. The possibility of another conversion, a mental alteration similar to what the Mule inflicted upon him. He recalls the seamless, painless nature of his first conversion and the unsettling thought that his past loyalties could be completely rewritten. This internal struggle highlights the core vulnerability of those subjected to the Mule's powers and, by extension, the potential mental prowess of the Second Foundation. The tension culminates when Pritcher, acting on a deeply ingrained suspicion and his controlled loyalty to the Mule, attempts to arrest Chanese, believing him to be a traitor in league with the Second Foundation. Pritcher presents his evidence, Chanis's improbable success in locating Tzenda, which he attributes to Second Foundation guidance, and the hyper-relay found on their ship, which he believes the Mule placed there to track a known traitor. Chanese, however, quickly disarms Pritcher's accusations, revealing his own knowledge of the hyper-relay and turning the tables. He argues that if he were a traitor, the Mule could simply convert him to extract the information. Instead, he asserts, the hyper-relay was placed by the Second Foundation, who are now pursuing them. He further exposes Pritcher's own mental tampering, revealing that the sluggishness Pritcher has felt as a sign of his initiative being rubbed out by the Second Foundation, while his loyalty to the Mule remains intact. Chanese dramatically concludes that the Second Foundation wants Pritcher, not him, because of Pritcher's extensive knowledge of the Union. He tries to convince Pritcher that his current actions are dictated by the Second Foundation's influence, not his own free will. Just as Pritcher, reeling from the realization of his compromised mind, is about to yield to Chanese, the Mule himself appears. His arrival shatters the fragile standoff. The Mule confirms that he placed the hyper-relay and that Chanis's deductions about the Second Foundation's involvement were merely the result of notions he had put into his head. He reveals his true, chilling intent. Chanese is a Second Foundationer, and the Mule knew this all along. The Mule's ultimate proof lies in his ability to momentarily induce grief in Chanese during their first meeting. Chanis's mind, for a fleeting instant, resisted the Mule's emotional manipulation, a resistance only possible for someone with similar mental control. The climax of Part 1 arrives as the Mule prepares to kill Chanese. But Chanese, with a burst of mental prowess, unleashes Pritcher's suppressed hatred for the Mule, effectively turning Pritcher into a living weapon. The Mule, caught between two immediate threats, Pritcher's uncontrolled rage and Chanis's direct mental challenge, is forced to drop his blaster. In this critical moment, the first speaker of the Second Foundation, who has been present, hidden and observing, makes his entrance. The first speaker reveals the intricate web of manipulation that led to this encounter. He admits his own miscalculation 5 years prior, which allowed the Mule to nearly locate the Second Foundation. He explains that the Mule's fleet had already attacked Tzenda, destroying it completely, under the false impression that it was the Second Foundation's home world. This was a calculated sacrifice, a painful but necessary step in the Second Foundation's desperate plan to protect themselves and Hari Seldon's legacy. The first speaker then delivers the devastating truth. Rossum, the seemingly innocuous peasant world thereon, is the actual Second Foundation. He reveals that Bale Chanes was a volunteer who underwent drastic emotional surgery, making him genuinely believe Rossum was the second foundation, thus deceiving the Mule himself. This revelation shatters Chanes, who realizes he has been a pawn in a far grander game. The first speaker then delivers the final blow to the Mule's carefully constructed empire. He reveals that while the Mule's fleet was busy destroying Tazenda, the real Second Foundation contingent from Rossum had already departed for Calgon, intending to incite rebellion and dismantle the Mule's power structure from within. The Mule, cornered and despairing, finally yields. In a profound and swift act of mental manipulation, the first speaker alters the Mule's motivations, transforming him from a ruthless conqueror into a benevolent ruler, effectively neutralizing him as a threat and restoring Selden's plan to its original trajectory. The first speaker then comforts the distraught Chanes, assuring him that his actions, though based on a fabricated reality, served the plan's ultimate purpose. Chanes, like Ebeling Miz before him, is left with a vast, numbing surprise, as the true location of the Second Foundation is revealed to him. It is here, on Trantor, not Rossum. Part 2. Search by the Foundation. Part 2 shifts perspective entirely, beginning with Arcadia Darrell, a precocious and imaginative 14-year-old girl, granddaughter of the legendary Beta Darrell, who famously stopped the Mule in his initial conquest. Arcadia, a budding historical novelist, is immersed in the lore of Selden's plan and the Foundation's history. She lives on Terminus, the home world of the First Foundation, a place of advanced physical science and growing self-assurance. Despite her youthful romanticism, Arcadia is fiercely intelligent and intuitive, traits that will prove pivotal. The narrative introduces drive. Toron Darrell, Arcadia's father, an electroneurologist who, years ago, abandoned his research into brainwave patterns, fearing the implications of discovering the Second Foundation's unseen influence. He is a man who desires autonomy and resents any force that might control his destiny. His old colleague, Dr. Kleis, continued this research, covertly mapping tamper plateaus, anomalous brainwave patterns indicating mental manipulation. Kleis's student, Pelias Onther, a young, keen electroneurologist, arrives at Darrell's home. He has inherited Kleis's work and intends to continue the investigation into the Second Foundation's subtle infiltration. Onther gathers brainwave data from Darrell and his colleagues, Joel Terbour, Visicaster, Dr. Elvat Semic, physicist, and Homir Munn, librarian. He presents them with evidence of tamper plateaus in the brainwave patterns of various influential figures across the Foundation's sphere of influence. This discovery confirms their suspicions. The Second Foundation is actively manipulating individuals within the First Foundation. Onther suggests that Homir Munn, with his unique collection of Muliana information on the Mule, and his established habit of visiting foreign planets, is the ideal candidate to travel to Calgon and search the Mule's untouched palace for clues about the Second Foundation. The palace, maintained as a sacred shrine, is believed to hold the results of the Mule's own 5-year search. The conspirators, aware of the immense risk, agree to the mission. Unbeknownst to the adults, Arcadia has been secretly recording their meetings with her homemade sound receiver, obtained through her shrewd manipulation of a schoolmate. Fascinated by the spy stuff, and driven by a romanticized hero worship of her grandmother, she decides to stow away on Homir Munn's ship, the Unimara. Her letter to her father, filled with innocent-sounding farewells, implicitly instructs him not to raise an alarm, fearing it would expose Munn's true mission and her own involvement. Munn discovers her mid-journey, much to his horror, but Arcadia, with surprising maturity and cunning, persuades him to let her stay by emphasizing the danger of attracting attention if he returns her. She even receives a space grab from her father, surprisingly accepting of her unauthorized trip, further solidifying her presence on the ship. Upon arriving on Calgon, Homir Munn struggles to gain access to the Mule's palace, initially being denied by Lord Stettin, the current ruler. However, Arcadia, applying her keen understanding of historical mistresses and their influence, subtly manipulates Lady Kalia, Stettin's mistress, into believing that Munn's research could benefit Stettin's imperial ambitions. Lady Kalia, though appearing shallow and easily swayed, proves to be surprisingly effective. Her conversation with Arcadia leads Stettin to reconsider, and he grants Munn permission to enter the palace, while also dispatching a fleet on war games. This suggests that Stettin, too, is being subtly manipulated, his ambitions being used to serve a larger, unseen purpose. Meanwhile, drive. Darrell on Terminus is racked with anxiety over Arcadia's disappearance, though he strives to maintain an outward calm. He confides in Semic, revealing his ongoing, secret work on a mental static device. a mechanism to create electromagnetic fields that would interfere with and even cause pain to minds possessing the Second Foundation's unique mental sense. This device, if successful, could provide a crucial defense against the mental manipulation of the Second Foundation. Pelias Anther, still at Daryl's side, uses his contacts to discover Arcadia's whereabouts. She fled Calgon for Trantor with a Trantorian trading representative named Prem Palver and his wife. Anther deduces that Arcadia, remembering her grandmother Beta's flight to Trantor after stopping the Mule, instinctively chose the historical center of the galaxy as her refuge. He also reveals a shocking truth. Lieutenant Dirge, the Calganian policeman who seemingly allowed Arcadia to escape, was himself a controlled agent of the Second Foundation. This confirms that Arcadia's escape was orchestrated, implying she is still a pawn in their game, even if she believes otherwise. The narrative intensifies with the declaration of war between Calgon and the Foundation. The Hober Mallow, a Foundation cruiser, is destroyed by a Calganian squadron, marking the formal beginning of the Statinian War. The Foundation finds itself strategically disadvantaged due to its sprawling, loosely knit territories compared to Calgon's concentrated power. However, the Foundation's deep-seated belief in the Selden Plan, a faith that has been reinforced over centuries, acts as a powerful psychological weapon, demoralizing the Calganian forces who secretly fear the Second Foundation's inevitable intervention. Homir Mun, still on Calgon, finds himself effectively a prisoner, yet he also gains vital information from the Mule's palace. He comes to believe that the Second Foundation does not exist and that the Mule's death was simply a natural consequence of his physical frailty. He becomes a confident, articulate spokesman for this theory, losing his stutter and nervous demeanor. This profound change in Mun's personality becomes a crucial detail. Prem Palver, Arcadia's guardian on Trantor, volunteers to transport foodstuffs to the besieged terminus, a dangerous but potentially lucrative venture. Arcadia, seeing an opportunity, convinces him to deliver a whispered message to her father. A circle has no end. This cryptic message, though initially meaningless to Palver, will be the key to unlocking the true location of the Second Foundation. The war culminates in the Battle of Khoristan, where the Foundation's fleet, though numerically inferior, decisively defeats the Calganian forces through a meticulously planned trap. This victory, orchestrated by the Foundation's admirals who rely on the assumed inevitability of Selden's plan, reinforces the Foundation's self-confidence and restores its morale. Homir Mun returns to Terminus as an unofficial ambassador of peace, convinced that the Second Foundation is a myth and that the Foundation's victory proves their own inherent strength. Back on Terminus, the original conspirators, Daryl, Anther, Terbor, and Semek, reunite. Homir Mun, still brimming with his newfound confidence, confidently declares that the Second Foundation does not exist. Anther, however, vehemently disputes this, pointing out Mun's drastic personality change and accusing him of being handled, or adjusted. To prove his point, Anther insists on a brainwave analysis of everyone present. The results confirm his suspicions. Mun's brainwave pattern shows clear signs of manipulation, a tamper plateau. Anther then delivers his shocking conclusion: the Second Foundation is on Calgon. He argues that the Second Foundation, masters of subtlety, would hide in plain sight, on a world that has just been defeated, thus diverting suspicion. Daryl, however, counter-argues. He reveals the true purpose of his mental static device: to inflict pain on those with the Second Foundation's mental sense. He then demonstrates its power on Anther, who collapses in agony, forced to admit his true identity. He is a Second Foundationer. Under duress, Anther confesses that the Second Foundation is located on Terminus, not Calgon, and that the entire Calganian War was a distraction to allow the First Foundation to rebuild its confidence and believe it had destroyed the Second Foundation. He reveals that Lady Kalia was also a Second Foundation agent, and that Arcadia's escape to Trantor was orchestrated to keep her out of the way. Anther admits they lost because Daryl's mental static device was unforeseen, a dangerous improvisation that their statistical psychohistory could not fully account for. Daryl, now convinced of the Second Foundation's presence on Terminus and believing he has them trapped, contemplates their fate, even suggesting sterilization or execution. Yet, a gnawing doubt lingers in his mind: Galaxy. When can a man know he is not a puppet? How can a man know he is not a puppet? The final twist arrives when Daryl questions Arcadia about her seemingly intuitive deduction that both foundations were on Terminus. Arcadia struggles to articulate her reasoning, experiencing a horrible sensation of something slipping just beyond her grasp. This triggers Daryl's deepest fear: that his own daughter has been subtly controlled. He performs an encephalographic analysis on Arcadia, a moment of profound personal agony for him. The results bring immense relief. Her brainwaves are normal. Overjoyed, Daryl celebrates their victory, believing the First Foundation is now the absolute master of the galaxy, finally free to build the Second Empire. The ultimate truth is revealed in the final chapter, the answer that was true. The first speaker, now explicitly identified as Prime Palver, Arcadia's Papa, from Trantor, meets with his student. He reviews the successful execution of their plan, which involved the sacrifice of 52nd Foundationers who deliberately allowed themselves to be discovered and destroyed on Terminus. The Calganian War was indeed a psychological maneuver to restore the First Foundation's self-esteem after the Mule's defeat. The mental static device, though a temporary threat, will eventually become a sterile device, as the First Foundation, believing itself free, will lose the motivation to pursue mental science. The true masterstroke of the Second Foundation's plan lies in their subtle manipulation of individuals, particularly Arcadia. The first speaker reveals that Arcadia Daryl was controlled, as an infant on Trantor, her mind a blank slate. Her seemingly intuitive deduction about Terminus being the Second Foundation's location, her flight to Trantor, and her cryptic message to her father were all carefully orchestrated elements of the plan. This masterful deception ensured that Daryl, the First Foundation's leading mental scientist, would ultimately believe he had trapped and destroyed the Second Foundation on Terminus, when in reality, the Second Foundation's true headquarters remained hidden on Trantor, at the social opposite end of the galaxy. Selden's seemingly ambiguous phrase, opposite ends of the galaxy, referred not to physical distance, but to societal development. The periphery, Terminus, the First Foundation, where the old empire was weakest, and the center, Trantor, the Second Foundation, where it was strongest. The Imperial Library on Trantor, left untouched after the Great Sack, was their true sanctuary and base of operations. The first speaker concludes with the chilling realization that all the First Foundation's apparent victories and discoveries were merely meticulously choreographed illusions, ensuring that the Second Foundation remains hidden, continuing its silent guardianship of Selden's plan. The final twist is that the reader, too, has been subtly manipulated throughout the narrative, just as the First Foundation was.